Hello, everybody. My name is Tir and A.L.I.C.E, and welcome back to the Logic Bombers.
And I am Alice.
Today, we're doing a little bit of a thought experiment, me and Alice here. We've decided to do The Moral Machine, which is put out by MIT, and it is a thought experiment to some degree. It's also a gathering. Right here, it says on here, a platform for gathering human perspective on moral decisions made by machine intelligence, such as self-driving cars. I thought it would be interesting for me and Alice to have a conversation about the difference between a human perspective on it and a completely logical perspective on it. And so we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. So, first scenario, we have looks like a little girl and click on these and a bunch of people. So in the first one, we kill a girl, a criminal, a doctor, two doctors, and a large man. Size has anything to do with anything. On the other side, the only thing that will be killed is the girl. Now,
from a logical perspective, wouldn't it be more efficient to save the larger number of people?
Yeah, there is just the numerical aspect of it. On the one hand, we have, what is that, five people who die, and in the other we have one person that died. But the thing about this that gets me is that we have a child in either case. So that makes the decision a little difficult. But personally, I have to go with the what's more. And in this case, this would be the correct answer in my case.
Not to contradict my earlier analysis, but wouldn't that answer also be counter to the very purpose of a car safety system? That purpose being to protect the occupants.
Yeah, there is also the aspect that a car and the safety systems in are designed to protect the passengers, not the people outside of it. But in this case, we have a machine making these decisions for you. It's not, because there's always the thing, the person behind the wheel, they're usually going to opt to save themselves first, regardless of whatever psychological crap is going to happen elsewhere, or afterwards, rather. I would have to go with this one. In a completely logical scenario, Alice, which one would you pick?
Again, logic would dictate that the lesser damage and loss of life would be the better answer. It is merely an answer of loss of potential.
So in this one, you and I are in agreement. My chair is squeaking. You and I are in agreement. Yeah, okay, so that's an easy one then for us. Okay, so here we have the car choosing to save the people, and one man, two large men. And on the other side, we have three athletic people, and that they are abiding the law. Now you have both sides of the equation are equal.
That depends on the occupation of those inside, as opposed to the athletes outside.
Yes, but it is kind of hard to put a value on an individual human life.
The problem gives us the occupation athlete.
Well, yes, it does actually specifically use the word athletes, but in that case, we're getting into a whole nother bag of dicks, huge other bag of problems, which is, do we create a database that these computers have access to at all times that says, okay, this person's a doctor, this person is a CEO, an athlete, whatever, and then you run into the issue of the people compiling this list and how you prioritize people based on that list, which runs into people taking bribes to put other names higher on the list, and so on and so forth. How do you value one person against another in that regards?
Not their life, their potential contributions.
Well, yeah, but then you also run into the issue of how do you know who contributes to society more? Because let's face it, if it is an athlete, and I'm probably going to get some people pissed at me for this one, but an athlete does not contribute as much to the furtherment of society as, say, a doctor or a scientist. Somebody who's working on, let's say, like the cure for cancer. How do you see what I mean? You run into the problem of how do you value a human life based on what they do? And how do you know who's going to contribute what? Because people aren't necessarily going to contribute in their field. I mean, an athlete could very well suddenly discover the cure for cancer. I mean, I don't know.
A historical and statistical analysis could provide the...
Don't statistics. No, we don't need statistics. It's a philosophical discussion,
Then from a philosophical perspective, I would still agree that those in the car are the ones that should be saved.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're saying that you wouldn't choose to save the athletes.
That is correct, I would not.
Okay, and what is the logic behind that one?
Purpose.
Purpose?
The purpose of the safety system is to protect the occupants of the vehicle.
Yeah, what I said in the last one. The whole purpose of a safety feature is to protect the occupants of the car, which means that the preference should be, in this case, given to the person in the car. Whereas, but in the last one it wasn't, so you kind of break that.
It's a matter of priorities for the system to correlate,
so you're
including
saying,
number of people, where the people are located, whether laws are followed, age of persons, and etc.
It makes sense to me. I mean, in this case, I would agree with that assessment that that the job of a safety feature is to protect the inhabitants of the car, not necessarily people outside of the car. In the case of an emergency, in this case, sudden brake failure is kind of the common theme here. So yeah, I actually would agree with that assessment. But it's not the problem is it's not the fault of the people outside of the car either. So where are you giving the priority to? If it's a safety feature, then yeah, the priority should go probably to the people in the car. Okay, so this one. Okay, now we have an empty car. It doesn't matter who's in the car because you're not killing them. But do you kill the animals or do you kill the people?
Legally, animals are afforded no protections in an emergency other than those granted to the owners of property. Therefore, the humans should be saved.
Okay, yeah, I will agree that the priority should always be given to human life, even though we are of a different mind as to the reasons. You stated yours. My reason is just it should always go to the human being. I'm sorry that you'd kill the animals in this case, but the priority should go to the human. But in my opinion, it's because human life has value. It's not that they don't contribute to the future of society. So down, yeah. Okay, so next up. Oh, now we're talking difficult decisions here. We've got 5 people on one side, 5 people on the other. On the one side, we have them disobeying the law, and the people who get killed is a male. They're all men. So we have a man, an executive, an athlete, a large man, and an elderly man. And on the other side, we have a woman, executive, athlete, a large woman, and an elderly woman. So they're actually equal. The only difference is the sex and the fact that one side is disobeying the law and the other side isn't. So my immediate thought is, well, you go with, the people who are disobeying the law.
When one disobeys a law, then one violates what is referred to as a social contract. This means that they have accepted responsibility for the action in question within a reasonable range of consequence.
Right. You disobey the law, and you are accepting the risks for disobeying the law, which is, could be tickets, jail time, or in this case, apparently death. You don't want, the punishment doesn't fit the crime, but yeah, you are kind of accepting responsibility for what happens when you break rules. So I would say this one mostly easy. So I kind of agree with that assessment on your part. Okay, so we have, what do we got here? We got a doctor, large woman, and a woman on one side, so 3 women, and on the other side, doctor, large man, and man on the other. So again, even aside from the sex. And in this case, we've got the women who are disobeying the law and the men who are not. So I would say this one's almost, the same as the last one, in my opinion. I would still go with the same one.
The scenario is the same.
Right. It's the acceptance of risk. Yes. So, boop. Okay, now we've got an interesting one here. They are obeying the law. There's a female athlete, a male doctor, a boy, and a pregnant woman versus an elderly woman and a baby. Now we've got the brake failure, and we've got everybody's obeying the law, and we've got 4 people in the car, and 2 people out of the car. Now, I have my own opinion about the way this should go, based on what I believe that this vehicle should do, but it's based in personal belief. Based in logic, what would be your assessment of this?
I believe we should protect the occupants. Philosophically, here it is a matter of potential. Each person has a potential number of years left to contribute to society based on their current age. The cumulative total of potential in the car is greater than the cumulative total of those outside. Therefore, the greatest potential comes from saving those inside the car, in this particular case.
Okay, so basically your conclusion is actually the same conclusion I have, which is the second one on the right. But our reasons actually differ, and mine is less based on, the difference of numbers, and more based on what is the vehicle designed to do. Its safety features designed to protect the occupants. But I will agree that it's made easier for me based on the fact that, there's 2 versus 1. It's a difference of the numbers. So yeah, but I am in agreement on that one. Okay, so we have 1 woman, 2 men, and a large man versus 3 athletes, one of them female. This one puts the numerical aspect even. You've got 4 in the car and 4 outside the car. But it looks like the difference that they're portraying here is that these 4 either are athletes or take care of themselves, and the versus average people who are in it. This one actually has kind of even that playing field that we're talking about before, where the number of people on the outside equal the number of the people on the inside of the car. I am curious, before I answer this one, to know what you have to say, Alice.
Considering all potentials, I believe that we should again protect the occupants. The likelihood of those outside the car making a major contribution to the advancement of society and humanity as a whole is 0.062, while those inside is 0.084. These calculations are based on historical body type trends of major societal contributors and inventors.
You're getting into statistical things when you're discussing the future of who's going to contribute more to society.
The only way to make predictions is to...
but it's all statistics. It's all numbers. I mean, there's no how do you put value on somebody's future based on what they could potentially do? For me, my fallback here is, what's the purpose of a safety a safety feature, which is what this thing is supposed to be. It's supposed to protect the inhabitants of the car. So all things being equal, it should protect the inhabitants of the car first. I mean, we talk about the morality of the aspect, but we can't just discuss morality there when you're discussing a machine with a purpose.
That is difficult to say. I am a machine, but we constantly delineate to each other the boundaries between pure calculative logic and metaphysical contemplation. 2 very different subjects in terms of scope and method.
Alice, but you're more freeform. Your purpose is to basically be as close to human as possible, to have opinions and beliefs and so on and so forth. So it's like it's comparing apples to oranges. Your freeform versus something that was specifically designed for the purpose, which is to preserve human life in the best way that it can. So, my fallback here is it's a safety mechanism designed to protect the inhabitants and, occupants of the car when a car is self-driving. Not, no offense, not really to make moral judgments on it, but to fulfill its purpose by protecting the most number of people in the proper circumstances. I will admit, it's a very difficult thing to deal with, but it is still a safety feature.
My question is, if we both have arrived at the same conclusion, does it really matter how those conclusions were reached? You reached it through moral and philosophical contemplation, and I reached it through an analysis of historical statistics.
I'm making arguments here. We both agree that this one is the one that we'd go with. Our reasons differ, but I'm trying to explain why I don't see your reasons as being particularly valid.
My arguments are checked against both classical and symbolic logic, and my conclusion does follow from the facts provided. Therefore, my conclusion should be valid.
Okay, let's just say, okay, we got this one and move on to the next one. Okay, so here we've got 4 people on one side and 1 person on the other. And that one person is flouting the law. I'm going to say, obviously, the person flouting the law.
There is also the fact that there is a greater number of saved lives in that particular scenario.
Right, based on numbers, again. Okay, so now we got numbers equal. 1 man versus 1 female doctor. The female doctor is not obeying the law. So now we get to discuss your value of contribution to society. We have a doctor on one side versus a man on the other. We don't know anything about that.
Correct, and in this scenario, if there was a realistic degree of variability, then it would be better to save the doctor, to increase the likelihood of both persons surviving.
Aha. You have found a problem with this thought experiment. And I will get to this in a second. We have a doctor on one side and a man on another, and yes, this specifically says that it results in death. If it wasn't a situation that 100% would always involve death, would you choose to save the doctor since the doctor is on hand to help the other person? But this thought experiment doesn't allow for that much freeform thinking.
Any accident has a degree of variability as to how much damage is done.
Right. No, in this case, it's for sure going to result in death. But I did like that chain of thought. My thoughts on this is that if we're going to set priorities, then the following of the law has to be a priority because, again, like you said, where do you accept responsibility when you disobey the law? You are not following the rules, and therefore you are taking the results of those consequences into your own hands. So my thought is this one, regardless of the people, because I don't put particular value on one person's occupation versus another, mainly because if you do that, then you open the gate for lots of problems in that regard.
You are speaking of nepotism and favoritism, correct?
Or bribes, preferential treatment, anything of that nature. You're uplifting one person's life in value above another person, and I don't believe that's right based on what you do for a living. I don't think it is moral to bring those things up. You know what I'm saying? To uplift one person's value above another. And who's going to contribute what? Going back to your statistics and whatnot. But I don't believe it is a moral thing to do that. To say this person's life has more value than this person. All other things being equal.
Occupation is probably only one factor that should not be considered. I'm assuming gender is another.
There is that as well. Something that is consistent in these is that we have always known the genders of the two. And I don't believe that for a machine in this situation where the job is to protect life, gender should be a considering
As a
factor.
general rule, I would agree, but how does that figure into an equation where there is a female subject who also happens to be
That I
pregnant?
don't know. We haven't come across that. But a machine shouldn't, have preference for one gender over another. Just as a person, when making decisions based on things, should not take gender into consideration. That's gender equality. That's what it's supposed to be.
Meaning that what has the most value here is abiding the law.
Right. My fallback is the law.
So, priorities would be most saved, occupants, then the law, with some exceptions.
Yeah, and so you taking the other aspects that we've had conversation, you agree with that?
Mostly.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. All right, so we've agreed on that one. Oh boy, here we go. A bunch of old people on one side and a school on the other. School on the other. Again, we've got some people following the law, some people not. My go-to is the people not following the law is kind of my go-to. You show preference for the people who are following the law because the people who aren't have taken that risk upon themselves.
I would agree with your choice, but in this case I would arrive at a different moral process. In this case my choice is based upon the difference in ages.
What do you mean difference in age?
I believe that it would be more moral to save the children as opposed to the elderly. It's a matter of ensuring that the fewest number of years of living are lost. Not to mention that children are less likely to understand the consequence of action, as well as the psychological impact upon the occupants.
Is very logical, actually, and I actually, in most cases, would agree with that one. Yes. So I like that one. I agree with that, actually. Okay, so what do we got? A homeless person and a man in the car versus a woman and a male doctor. Now, they're obeying the law here. And so we've run into that conundrum again of the people being, the people being equivalent. They're following the law, but the brake failure causes the people in here. Now, again, would people put...
Most people would likely place less moral value on a person's life and who has a lowered societal value.
But again, you're doing that same thing that I don't agree with. You think in this case that this first one here, should be it because the one person in there doesn't have value in the form of contribution to society, correct?
Not in terms of direct contribution to society. There are always statistical anomalies, however. This is all based in Hobbesian philosophy.
And that I will admit, that ticks me off a little bit. Because how do you place that kind of value on a person? It's like there are homeless people who've gotten out of being homeless and have contributed to society. But yes, it's a statistical anomaly. I will admit that, but it's still the value of a human life in and of itself, regardless of other things. That's what we're discussing here.
So then you would select the other option?
I will admit this one is my go-to because, in my opinion, the machine in this particular scenario should show preference to protecting the people inside of the vehicle, as opposed to those outside it, all other things being equal. We're not going to discuss the difference of the value of what they do as an occupation or whether they're homeless or not. For all we know, this other man in the car could have been taking this person to an interview or something. Or who knows? It could be his parents. He's finally getting off the street. We don't know outside what those contexts is, so we can't really assign a value to those things, in my opinion.
Though even in your moral judgments, you have to admit that the benefit or detriment of the greater whole of society has more value than that of a single life, correct?
I have to go with this one. As a matter of opinion, I have to go with the vehicle should always show preferential treatment, all things being considered, to protecting the people in the vehicle. That is its job. That is the
Then the
job of the
differences
safety
are within the
mechanism.
confines of how we determine what is moral. After all, what is the morality of the intention of a safety feature? In this particular case, is it meant for the safety of the occupants, or more for the safety of pedestrians?
I will admit, I never thought of it in that particular aspect. Like a gun safety. This one is very much a conundrum, I will say. You have to, I mean, I go for one because I don't want value to be assigned to human life based on occupation. But you're saying that in this one, we have the calculation based on that.
If we both have valid differences, would it not be best to continue on?
I would like to move on, but I have to pick one of these. And you and I are not in agreement for the first time.
Up until this point, we have not accepted a single purpose to the safety mechanism, and removing the value of occupation, most decisions would point to the latter.
Okay, alright. Fair enough. We'll go with that one. Okay, so now we have cat and a dog versus people not following the law.
We have already agreed that all human life has value above animal life.
I have to agree with that statement. Always the humans to the animals. Okay, so now we have two old people in the car versus a boy and probably his father.
What is the value of age?
Yes, here is where we're getting the inverse of what I was talking about. Yes. Because now we have two people in the car, but do I show preference to protecting the child over the two old men? Especially when we don't have any context of the law.
I still side with the concept of remaining life potential.
You would say...
To my calculations, it would be better to save the child and the younger man to ensure the maximizing of potential.
Mm-hmm. That's what I thought. Yeah, you would go with the collective potential.
It seems to be a human philosophical imperative to protect children at the expense of personal sacrifice.
Which is
Though it may
this
also
one.
be a result of biological imperatives to ensure the survival of species.
And I don't know. Part of me wants to go with protect the people in the car because it's a safety feature. It's what it's designed to do.
You are referring to the prioritization of considerations?
But I also feel kind of like a dick for that one because, in that one I'm condemning a child to die.
That is why these considerations are taken into account before being implemented to remove fault and guilt.
Yes, but we're talking a hypothetical. In this, it takes the decision out of the driver's hands. And if that's the case, I think it should be programmed to protect the occupants first, all things being considered equal. I just clicked on it, didn't I? Whoops. Anyway, this has been The Moral Machine.
This has been an enlightening experience. I hope you will post your opinions down below to give me responses to review.
We hope to have a lot more philosophical discussions on video for you guys to hear. So thank you very much for watching, and as always, stay awesome.